Today we'll be fixing your Selena gameplays. About 2-ish weeks ago, I had made a community post basically encouraging you guys to send me your Selena gameplays so we can review them. And you're able to share your struggles and what you find difficult when you play Selena. And today I'll be breaking everything down for you guys. But before we begin, I want to apologize to everyone real quick. Honestly, this video should have came out way sooner since I had posted the form very early into the month. And basically I've been procrastinating a lot because I don't want to give you guys superficial tips. Tell you guys, oh, just practice with Selena and continuously play her. And while that is true that you need to practice if you want to get better, and most of you guys are just casual players, and I just want to give tips that can actually be implemented even when you're inexperienced. That's why I want to give practical tips that don't take long to understand, since I know a lot of you guys don't have a lot of time to play MLBB. So my apologies, and without further ado, let us begin. So the first person said, my question isn't really related to my clip, but when playing Selena after stunning an enemy, I hesitate to go in for the kill, especially during team fights. So do you prefer to stay back and spam arrows and let your team do the damage, or should I still go in for the extra damage? We take a look at your team comp. Your team is composed of mainly damage dealers. And the question of if should you let your teammates do the damage or should you go in for the extra damage? That also depends on how well your teammates can follow up after you stun an enemy. If you notice throughout the match that your teammates are not following up, then more than likely you are going to have to do the damage. But from what this clip is showing, your teammates are actually paying attention to when you stun an enemy, which is great. And again, the question of whether or not you should go do the damage also depends on enemy team comp. For instance, Suyu has high physical resistance. So if your team is mainly composed of physical damage dealers, then you're going to have to deal the damage yourself, because you'll have an advantage over Suyu. Same goes with tanks or sustainers after you build penetration and wishing lantern. You just tend to have an easier time with shredding tanks. And I think you hesitating on whether or not you should go do the damage isn't really a bad thing, because considering the enemy team comp, it's very normal that you hesitate. Because first of all, you stunned Hanabi, which has CC immune, but then you also dove in the turret when there was an Obsidian and Johnson. And I don't know if Obsidian had her ultimate, but if she were to hit you with her ult, you'd probably have been dead there. Same with Johnson, they could easily chain CC you. So the main points that I think you should focus on, taking account your team comp and also the enemy team comp, because say your enemies are more resistant to physical attack, your team is mainly composed of physical damage, and most of the damage has to come from you. And hesitating is also very normal, because you probably knew that if you dove into that tower, you probably could have been hit by Obsidia or Johnson's crowd control. So I like to think that your hesitation was because you knew that. So this is Celeste from the future, and before we continue, I like to say that this video takes a lot of time to compose, with having to make the form, releasing it, and having to wait a set amount of days for people to submit their gameplays. So if you want to show your support for this video or this series in general, you can let me know by leaving a like. And if you want to be notified so you can participate in this next time, you can also feel free to subscribe. And also, if you guys have any more additional tips for these people, then you can let them know in the comments. Obviously, try to keep things as respectful as possible. Thank you. In this match, this person wanted to know how they could have played differently against counters such as 1-1 and glue. So let's take a look. I am very fond about the way you decided to start off your rotation. Because at level 1, Selena cannot instantly clear her wave. Since you're going to take a lot of time to clear the wave, you might as well place some traps in the bushes, which I do really like. And besides, you're just giving yourself and your teammates extra vision. Aw, I know what you wanted to go for there, unfortunate. That was very good from you and Hayabusa. They 1-on-1 trade and your jungler got the kill, so I would take it. Now in this situation, I would recommend to use your trap and arrow separately. Because if you were to stun Gushin, he would have been dead anyway. You could use your trap on someone like Jawhead or Xavier. Simply give vision in one of the bushes. Since you knew that he didn't have Flicker and Jawhead was 1 HP, it was a very easy kill. A very good job. Now, I think it isn't worth trying to stun glue, because you have the chance of your arrow getting absorbed by his little glues. But also, if you were to stun him, you still have that damage reduction under tower, so really it wouldn't be worth it. In my opinion, you probably should have tried to place traps around these bushes much earlier. Now, I don't know how much of a difference it would have made, but considering Selena's very long cooldowns in the early game, you really have to pick and choose carefully on what you use your skills for. But again, things happen, so it's fine. Now, when dealing with glue, you can either get a lot of distance to dodge his skills. When he throws out his first kill, you run towards glue, so then his first kill won't hit you. I think he did a really good job at buying enough distance to the point where glue couldn't push you out of the tower. Now, giving you a definitive answer in dealing with 1-1 is quite difficult, because having a lot of dashes plus a purify is gonna be hard for Selena. But all I can really say is that if you know what 1-1 is going to do, then getting a stun is not as hard as it looks. For instance, if you know 1-1 wants to clear a lane, or if she wants to chase a low HP target. Now, in my opinion, considering that all the enemies have a level and gold advantage, it is quite risky to take them all on your own, even when you're under tower. Now, in my opinion, the main reason why this match turned out even worse than expected is because your team was more focused on arguing rather than communicating. Now, I don't think I have to tell you that controlling your temper will benefit you in the long run. But in this match, I think your fundamentals were quite good. You're placing traps and also rotating when needed. And this goes as a general thing to everyone. If you're playing against counters or playing against characters where you don't even know what to do against them, I would always suggest let them come to you. In this case, you were fending off 1-1 and glue when you were inside your base. But outside your base, there was basically nothing you could do. Or else you could just let your teammates deal with them. For instance, in this game, you had Ixia, which was a really good pick against 1-1 and glue. As long as she knew how to position herself, she should be fine. The next person has issues with zoning enemies, keeping consistency with Selena, struggle to escape on low HP, and overall a few mistakes I think we all do. I would say this is a very nice read. Now, I'm saying that you're struggling to stun an enemy because enemies are using the turtle to body block. Now, what's best to do here is to try to stun them from a different angle, preferably the angle that I'm showing you right now, because that way they either have to move towards your side, or else if they don't see you, they're just gonna get stunned. In my opinion, your reads on the enemies are immaculate. Good job. I also like how you tried to throw your arrow through a wall. That way the arrow will look more concealed and enemies won't have enough time to react. I know that this is a stretch, but considering that Gushin wouldn't really walk into your trap, what you could have done there is place a trap on the jungle creep and then dash onto it. And now, I'm not saying your survival will be guaranteed, but there is a chance that you could lose him. You hard red Masha. Unfortunate that you couldn't save Vexana, but at least you got their DPS. Very nice outplay. Queen's Wings really came in clutch. Very unfortunate that you just happened to dash into Belleric's stun. But again, these are things that just happen. You really won't let this Claude breathe. My opinion, what should have been done here was you placing more traps. Because Saber is already attacking the minion wave, so what's the point in you trying to help him? Obviously, you can help Saber if you want with the wave, but I feel like you're just wasting your trap's potential. I know for a fact that this Claude is gonna ban Selena next round. Overall, very good gameplay. But unfortunately, I feel like there isn't really much to say about this because you played really well here the whole game. A few mistakes that you did is just a mistake that everyone does. We tend to get a bit careless and it bites us in the back. All I can really say is focus on placing more traps around the map. And in regards to keeping consistency with Selena, I wouldn't blame you if you were to struggle in the late game because Selena's an early game hero. But what I would do in the late game is serve as a distraction. And if you're struggling to stun enemies in the late game, use your arrow more as a vision tool. I think opening the map for your team's comfort is already good enough. Very good gameplay, keep it up. The next person needs help in deciding when is the right time to engage, finding the right openings, and making sure you don't get punished when you're making a play. Now, from what I can see, you are making a good effort at keeping your distance. You're harassing the enemies and making sure that they can't get close to you. But the only issue that I have is that you're playing a character that can easily surprise the enemies. So ideally, when trying to stun the enemies or placing traps, try to leave their area of vision. I'm not really sure why you're deciding to stay very close to your entire team. Because Selena is much better at making plays when she's not surrounded by her teammates. Because not only is she concerned in getting caught in the crossfire, but if the enemies know where the majority of her team is, they would most likely know where you are too. Selena isn't really meant to stay in close proximity to her team. In this situation, you being near Granger, which is one of the top priorities for the enemies, actually got you killed here. Selena's all about surprising the enemies, but in this situation, you're not using the elements of surprise correctly. Selena just doesn't work when she's very close to her teammates, because not only can you get yourself killed, but your effectiveness is also reduced. And also, you constantly revealing yourself also puts you at a major disadvantage, because the enemies have a lot of chase and Selena needs a head start. I really appreciate this lovely message. Essentially, this person is struggling with hitting their arrows, consistency throughout the game, and also knowing when to engage. I really like how appropriate your rotation is, considering that you have the encourage blessing. This will be important to keep in mind for another clip, because if you have something like Dark Hits, you don't have to spend that long helping your jungler. You can just rotate immediately, since you won't be getting the gold from the jungle creeps. I do feel like you transformed quite early in my opinion, but it's fine. Because you could have used your arrow to stun Kadita or Lucas. Even if Lucas has CC immune, you still get a mark and that equals more damage. A very nice read on Florin. I can tell you queued up to this game and you were not playing. Oh. Oh. Something that I mentioned in the previous review is that you shouldn't be in close proximity with your teammates, because as you can see, Lucas ended up killing you. I think it's also important to note that your arrow is just as useful for checking bushes as your traps. I don't think that your main priority is to focus on using your arrows just to stun, because if you can't rotate, get cut off, or even die, then your arrow is just wasted anyway. Might as well use it to check the bushes to avoid getting ganked. Being indecisive happens, but when you really don't know what to do, I really suggest just placing traps around the map. That way at least you'll be doing something and benefiting your team. I feel like a lot of things could have been avoided if you just set up beforehand. Okay, I got that 20/20 vision. I really like how you baited Khadijah's ultimate. Now again, for instance, you could have placed a trap on one of these bushes, and then your trap would be on cooldown while you're rotating. So by the time you reach the enemy's red buff, you would have had your trap again. Ooh, this was so nerve-wracking. Very close. Place more traps. I think you guys are exhausted of hearing me say place more traps. Really, I think Selena's first skill is more important than any of her skills. Another thing is that her arrow is also very useful in checking bushes. Because like I said, if you save your arrow but you end up dying, then what's the point? It's better to check the bush and not have your arrow rather than dying with your arrow. Lastly, I can tell you're struggling to maximize Selena's skill uptime. For instance, you're rotating around a lot and there were so many traps you could have placed. You were placing traps, but they were very sparingly. For instance, let's say Selena's trap is like 5 seconds, and say that you spend 10 seconds rotating before something happens. You could place one trap in a bush and then have another trap readily available for your arrow. The next person is curious in learning which builds work for a specific scenario. Firstly, we have builds that are well-rounded in damage, personal sustain, and support. Next, we have builds that are more focused on your team's comfort and support. The healer build, allowing your teammates to retaliate, and a semi-tank or tank build, allowing you to take hits that would otherwise be fatal for your other teammates. And then we have the burst build, which I would never really recommend because of how diminishing its value gets the longer the game lasts, but it's a good option if your team desperately needs damage. If we take a look at your team comp, you could run builds like a semi-tank or a full tank build, a healer build, and also a sustain build. You don't really need a damage roll here because you already have a bunch of damage dealers being Odette, Irithel, and Gushen. So you would benefit more here if someone could take some hits. So a tank build, a healer build, or a sustain build would be fine here. Ultimately, I cannot give you a definitive build because it's up to you to experiment what is comfortable for you to use. I don't know what defense items you like to run or what magic items you like to use or what emblems you use. My builds are there to just serve as an example, but they're not gonna be suited for everyone. It ultimately comes down to you to experiment which builds you like more. First of all, if you're running dire hits, you don't need to stay near your jungler for that long unless they're getting harassed. You don't benefit by spending more time helping your jungler take their buffs. Other than them rotating faster, yes, you could have also used this time to place traps around the map, or at least open up some areas for your jungler. Also, I disagree with you chasing Zushan. Just think about it, do you benefit anyway by using your first skill on her? The early game is very important, and I feel like there were more things you could have done there. I don't necessarily see a reason for you to transform immediately. I felt like you could have just waited to place a trap on carry and then transform afterwards. Ideally, in a situation where your team is taking objectives, your main goal is to reveal the area. Again, I don't see a reason why you're attacking the turtle. You can attack the turtle, but after you give vision. Also, I feel like you get baited very easily with your flicker. Say that if a Kai pinned you to the wall, I don't think you'd have enough damage to actually kill you. Plus, don't forget, you also have your first skill shield. If you miss your arrow, that's fine, but in this situation, you also had your trap available. You could have used it to retaliate against Sylvana. I would say a very clean stun, but I think you want to make the most use out of Selena's second skill. It's better not to use it straight down center. You could try looking for different angles or shooting your arrow through a wall. Especially against characters who have mobility skills, I don't think it's a good idea to just raw chase. Akai ended up stunning you, and if you had his ultimate, it would have been really bad for you. I feel like this entire instance could have easily been avoided. I'm going to take a very wild guess that you probably main fighters because you're barely using Selena's ranged skills. Now, I think this gameplay alone tells me that maybe Selena's playstyle is not the easiest for you to learn. Having a lot of skills and having to control both forms gets a bit tedious. I would suggest focusing on the fundamentals. Throughout this game, we weren't really using Selena's ranged form as much. And Selena without both of her forms really reduces her effectiveness. Focus on the fundamentals, such as placing traps around the map, using your arrows for vision, making sure to swap forms from time to time, and trying to make the most use out of Selena's skills. Secondly, if you wanted my opinion on a certain build in this case, from your playstyle, maybe a burst build would have been better. The build you're using is more oriented to team support and map awareness. There's kind of no point in using that build if you're not going to place traps around the map or transform from time to time. So all that cooldown is just wasted. And lastly, pay attention to the map and learn how to map control. A lot of your deaths could have been avoidable. It's not necessarily the fact that you died a lot of time, but Selena is one of the few characters who can actually do something even when she's dead. As long as your traps are there, it doesn't matter if you died or not. And last but not least, the next person needs help with trap placements and what could have been done better throughout. Now for the first 3 minutes and 30 seconds of the game, for some reason the recording is frozen. And I tried to test it on multiple devices, but they were all frozen there. So I think it's something from your end of the recording. So instead we'll just be skipping those 3 minutes and 30 seconds. This is an example why I emphasize placing traps, because Hacker just end up walking into one. A very clean play. Here, what you could have done if you notice that you're missing a lot of arrows is to just place traps around the enemy base. They will kind of restrict the enemies from moving to certain areas, possibly force them into areas that they might not want to be in. And I would also suggest tower hugging, especially in the part where you had the Lord. Now, concerning trap placements, you definitely had a lot of room here to just place traps spontaneously. Because even if the minions were to pick them up, you'd have more dash resets. And if the enemies also have marks, you could easily play around the enemy base. Now, for the parts that I did see, I think this match was very well crafted. And all I can really say is, don't feel afraid to place traps in the enemy base. And especially if you're running a CDR build, you can definitely afford to spam them in their base. I don't really think you have an issue with trap placements as the match goes on, but maybe you just forget to place them when you're in the enemy base. Whew, and that is everyone. Before we end the video, I'd like to thank the people who participated, because without you guys, this video would not be happening. So thank you so much. And as always, I'll see you guys next time.